Welcome back to Fast Market. I'm your host, Tom White, with my microphone on now, joined by my co-host, Kevin Hinks. And Kevin, let's bring in our next guest, and that's going to be Megan Brantley. She's a Vice President of Research at LikeFolio.com. And Megan, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, how are you guys doing?
We're doing good. We're talking Etsy ahead of earnings. Now, this is one of those companies that just hit all-time highs last week. And if you look at the supply chain issues that a lot of retailers and a lot of businesses are having, Etsy's kind of the opposite, right? And that's probably why we've seen the stock rally so much this year, is that they don't have those supply constraints. It's small businesses that are providing products for people. But what's your data at LikeFolio showing us here on Etsy ahead of earnings?
Yeah, so whenever we look at all of this chatter, especially surrounding holiday shopping, we see consumers who are starting their holiday shopping early. We see a lot of consumers who are concerned about these supply chain constraints. That's really rare to see just your average citizen talking about the supply chain. And we've seen that grow tremendously in the last year. So you have people who are worried that they're not going to be able to get the gifts that they want, or they're worried that the gifts that they want are going to cost more. And so they're also worrying about just in general shipping delays. So you kind of have a lot of these concerns looming over the minds of consumers. And Etsy is a natural kind of beneficiary because, as you mentioned, it's kind of insulated from this. We're talking about these mom and pop shops. We're talking about individual sellers who are, on a much smaller scale versus potential, big box retailers. And so whenever we look at someone like an Etsy, we do see somewhat of a deceleration in their growth compared to last year, because last year, a lot of these brick and mortar stores were closed completely. So Etsy was just this natural beneficiary. So I think that there's a really high bar whenever you look at year over year growth, but whenever we look at growth versus 2019, we do see signs of stickiness. Those mentions are about 26% higher versus 2019. We listen to people talking about making a purchase on Etsy. So I think that this is kind of setting up for a really interesting current quarter that we're in. So for the last quarter, we definitely are picking up on those signs of deceleration, but this is one that, especially heading into this holiday season where these bigger picture trends are looming, Etsy could be a huge beneficiary.
Megan, Warren Buffett has a quote that says, "The best business is a royalty on the growth of others," right? Requiring very little capital itself. And that is what basically Etsy does. They don't have inventory. They're just basically a middle person whose free cash flow margin is 24%, which means every dollar they bring in, they keep 24 cents of it, which is an incredible business model. And it's why this stock is going towards all-time highs, because their business model is one that makes money. Now, in your professional opinion, Megan, and seeing all the data that you see, what could derail this company from being as lucratively profitable as they currently are? This business model is like the perfect scenario for a company, but as you know, nothing's perfect. What could derail their momentum, Megan?
I think that's a good question. One of the things that we like to do is we look at these scatter plots, and I don't think we have one today, but one that I was looking at through when I was considering this is you consider Etsy versus these kind of platform-based search engines. So you think about Etsy, you think about Amazon, you think about eBay, and whenever you look at Etsy versus those peers, they're far superior. They're definitely outperforming whenever, especially you consider a 2-year basis. Etsy is sitting in that top right corner in terms of happiness, in terms of demand growth, versus those, the eBays and the Amazons of the world. But then if you add, say, Shopify to that list, you see Shopify exceeding Etsy. So I think that there is a sense of these smaller businesses are able to go direct to consumer. Maybe you don't have to go through a middleman, as you mentioned. If you get really sophisticated, you work on this, reaching consumers just directly. So I think that is a potential just something to be aware of. However, I think that Etsy, one of the things that they've been working on, they talked about, improving their search. I went through and I tested it today, and I was able to, type in there, Christmas gifts for grandmas. I'm trying to think of, what am I going to get my grandmother for Christmas? And I don't know many other places where you can type in generic searches like that and have direct personalized options show up that you can then purchase.
Yeah, Megan, that's a good point, because I've tried that before, like on Google or go to Amazon, where you're looking, I'm looking for a gift for a teenager, and it's just so much stuff if it's curated more towards what you're looking for. But at the same time, if you look at some of the data, it dropped off from 2020 levels, right? Because everybody was buying the face masks. But you look at Christmas, this holiday shopping season coming up, and the supply constraints that we're already seeing, because you're hearing from stores that you can't find anything, you've got to order early. Is this doable by Etsy and a lot of these small businesses, according to your data, where we're going to see that ramp up even more as far as not only happiness, but actually app downloads and happiness?
Yeah, so whenever we look at, I like that you brought up the app downloads, because what Etsy has said is that when people are shopping on mobile, those are the highest conversions. And what you can see here is those starting to tick up into the holiday season. Obviously, that growth exploded during the pandemic as people were locked down and they're shopping and they're downloading Etsy. But the fact that we start to see that tick up again here on the very far right of this chart, I think that's promising. Whenever you look at all of the top shopping apps on the Apple Store, Etsy's number 6. And I think that the people in front of it, you've got Amazon, you've got Shopify, you've got Nike, and you've got Walmart. So I think that's really good company for Etsy to be in. This is, last quarter they said they were number 7, now they're number 6. So they're obviously, gaining traction here with consumers. And it's a good sign that those mobile shoppers are more engaged.
Kev, did you have another question for Megan real quick?
No, I just, like I said, when you talk about their competition, right, you just mentioned the who's who in terms of retail, right, is their competition on the App Store. And the one that surprised me, that jumped out at me, was Nike, because that's the only one that isn't a multi-brand, right? You're looking at Nike going, wow, that is interesting that Nike's in there. That makes me really feel favorable about Nike, that they're in there competing with these big boys for their products. So, it just comes back to the question I always ask about a thing like this. Why didn't eBay do this? Why isn't this this space already taken by a stock like eBay, Megan?
Yeah, I think that was a huge missed opportunity. I think Etsy has done a really good job of connecting buyers and sellers. When we look at consumer happiness, we see Etsy's happiness about 15 points higher than eBay. So Etsy is obviously creating a better perceived experience for the consumer, and also even in those seller mentions that we look at. So I think that, in this earnings perspective, when we look at this earnings score, we rate this on a positive 100 to a negative 100. Etsy is coming in around a negative 10, which is actually pretty neutral in our data, but it's due to that tempering in that year-over-year growth that we discussed. However, I think that this next quarter is really going to be the big one. I think that Etsy is prime for capitalizing on these changing consumer behaviors and this early Christmas ramp up. And so that's definitely something we're watching really closely, because we think that long term they're positioned very well. So any type of a pullback that we see on this earning we might look at as a long-term opportunity.
Now, do you have an earnings score on this name going into earnings here, Megan?
Yeah, so it was a negative 10, which is technically neutral, but I think it does show that there is that deceleration in growth. And I do think that Etsy kind of, alluded to this, that there would be this deceleration in growth. But, long term, we do like the fact that happiness is still extremely high, and that demand is still growing versus 2019, that there is some stickiness here, but we wouldn't be surprised to see a near-term pullback, but we still do really like this name comparatively.
Yeah, with the shares up 35% so far this year, maybe getting a little bit frothy here, but you like it for the long term. Appreciate it, Megan. And remember, if you've seen something on TikTok or on Reels, then you go to Etsy. It's usually on there, from what I gathered from my looking into this company. So we'll take all that data ahead of our example trade here. Thanks to Megan Brantley. She's the Vice President of Research at LikeFolio.com.